Okay, welcome to the 3D modeling characters, the tutorial that will walk you through some of the basics on building your very first, in many cases, 3D character using Maya. This is going to be our final assignment for this class, so hopefully all of the things that I'm about to go through, not all of them will be 100% clear to you. You may have seen these, you may have heard of these techniques, but at least inside of Maya, there won't be a huge disconnect. So I'll be able to work a little bit faster than I may have normally. So this PowerPoint that I'm presenting, I've hopefully, if you're watching this at the right time, you've already been given the printout of this PowerPoint. Just want you to look through it, and I will be using pretty much the information in there to create a character in this video. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to talk a little bit about how to design characters. Now, if you've already been the sort of person in high school or even afterwards who loves to just sort of sketch and doodle, you're pretty much on the right track. Before I begin any character design, the first thing that I like to do is sort of just experiment with shapes. This technique that you see right here is just using Photoshop. I grab a brush, maybe like a paintbrush, and then using a Cintiq tablet, you can see that if I get the brush just a little bit bigger, I can change the angle of it, I can change the width of it, and I can just sort of put lines down to it. What I can also do is I can change the opacity of my brush, and I can turn it into almost like a watercolor brush. So this is the technique that I'm using to do this. Obviously I wasn't using a brush with a lot of texture. I think I was using this one. Yeah, this is basically what I was doing. So you can see that as I'm painting down just regular lines, as I cross over them, the semi-transparent paint starts to get layered down. Very useful technique. I highly recommend it if you've never used Photoshop much before. It's definitely very helpful. But the first thing that I would do is I would just go through and I would make little shapes. And if I found something that kind of stuck out at me as unique or interesting, or just something that I was kind of in the mood of seeing, I would start to redraw that a little bit different. So these were just examples of the first pass. Keep in mind that you should never do your very first idea. Your very first idea is usually not the best idea. So if I look at the next set, here I'm sort of taking ideas from this one. The sort of tall guy with the larger nose that sort of sticks out. I liked that silhouette. And here he is again, a couple of different ways. He's got a little pot belly. His shoulders are a little bit more broad, but the essence of the character is kind of always there. Here he is as if he was maybe bald and more of a thin chin. Here it is, basically the complete opposite, where his chin and his jowl area is wider. This is sort of pushing it to an extreme, almost like I started putting a baker's hat on him just because he kind of looked like I don't know, like he would be making bread or something. And I would continue doing this, and I know I'm sort of moving through this quickly, but keep in mind this process is very important, and it may take a little bit of time for you to sort of explore the possibilities and see what's possible. But eventually I came to this particular character design, and this was something that I liked. Still not sure if I'm going to give him a mustache yet, still working on that, but I liked the character overall, and so this is the character that I've decided I'm going to build. Now, the thing about it, though, is that when we design our characters, chances are they're standing in a way, or we're posing them in such a way, that they wouldn't be very useful trying to use these images as reference inside of the computer. And so what we need to do is we need to build what's known as a orthographic view. And what that means is absolute front, absolute side. No three-quarter. Three-quarters are great for poses and portraits, but not for actually making a character design into what you'll be using as a reference in 3D. This is an example of an orthographic. Now, before I get into how I got here, let me show you a couple of things. This piece of paper, I'm calling it a piece of paper, it's a Photoshop file, is actually the size, and if we check underneath image size, this is using the Photoshop default for just a piece of paper. It's an 8.5 by 11 image, and notice here the resolution is 300. This is great if you're planning on printing something out, but if you're doing something inside of Maya, we definitely don't want these settings, okay? So what I did was I went up to File, and I asked for a new file. And instead of choosing a US paper setting, which is where I got the 8.5 by 11, I said I wanted to do something custom, made sure that I was set to pixels, be sure you're not inside of inches, pixels, and I've made it 2048 by 2048. And keep in mind, this is the important part. The resolution is set at 72 dpi. Now 72 dpi doesn't sound very much, and it's not if we were going to be printing this. But keep in mind that video, even if it's HD video, the resolution of pixels is still 72 dots per inch. Now they're coming out with new types of TVs that get to brag that they have a higher resolution, but the funny thing is it's not really going to do much because all of the source material, all of the cameras, all of the video cameras, all of the still cameras, even Maya, by default, will be rendering in 72 dpi. Okay, so I hit OK, and what we get is this blank square, perfect square image. Now, I'm the kind of person, I'm not a huge fan of these little tabs inside of Maya because I want to take something from this project and put it into this one. So I'm just going to tear it off so that now I have two floating windows in front of me. And this is just going to make my job a little easier. So I'm just going to shrink that down so I can see both of them at the same time. I'm going to find that picture that he's on, and I'm just going to drag it into this other composition. Now, holding down, I'm doing Control, Alt, and Spacebar, you can see that this image is considerably larger. So what I'm going to do is just hit Control T, and now I can hold down Shift from the corner, and I can just scale it down. Pretty simple, right? So, this is how I got my original setup. I'm just going to close this out because you'll see that this takes over from where that left off. So here's that drawing of that character. And don't worry about the lines right now. We'll go back to that in just a second. So here's that drawing. And what I did was I put it onto a layer, and I put it underneath my other image layers. And what I did is I began to draw a perfect front view based on my original drawing as a reference. Now, there was a little bit of give and take in this. We had to, make some adjustments. But if you look closely, you can see that the drawing is pretty close to the original drawing. The only difference is that this character is now staring straight out. So, because I'm doing this all inside of the same image, I can use multiple layers so that I can bring one character on top of the other. I drew the side view first, and then I drew the top view. Now, this might look really complicated and hard to understand, but watch what happens if I take the side view and just change the opacity so that it becomes just kind of a ghost in the background. This is going to allow me to make sure that all of my shapes are in the right spot. Once I'm pretty satisfied with it, I just use my Move tool, hold down Shift, and slide it over so that it's on the other side. Now, another interesting part of this is in order to make sure that everything is lined up properly, if I come over to my view, extras will be on by default. These blue lines I made myself, and I did it by coming up into, you see how these numbers here, this is my ruler. Well, if you don't see that, just come over to View and say I want to see my rulers, and then these rulers will pop up. And if you don't see them as 100, 200, 300, this is pixels, right-click on it, and you might be seeing it like this in inches. Just right-click on it and say, I want to see it as pixels. Now, from inside of this ruler, when I click my left mouse button and drag down, I can set a line anywhere I want. So it was very easy for me to simply click and drag to make sure that each one of these very important areas on the front view and the side view match up. So this line right here tells me that this is the top of his eye line. And if we follow it over, we can see that that's still the top of the eye line. Now there's a little bit of inconsistency. For example, the very tip of his nose is right here on this line, but if I look at it over here, it's just a little bit further up. That might be something that I'll have to fix in 3D, because once I see this character as a 3D shape, that nose may not be exactly what I want. It might work really well for a 3/4 view or even a profile view because it's just a fun shape. But once we bring it into 3D and we start making that shape, it might become sort of a distraction to us. It might not be exactly what we want. So keep in mind that you're going to be using these images as guides, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's got to be absolutely 100% right. So even if your shoulder is slightly off compared to the other image, just make sure that you understand what you're doing and that you're building your 3D character using these as just an example or a reference. Okay? So, the reason that I've created this perfect square is because I'm going to be able to bring this into Maya on a plane, and when I make a plane inside of Maya, it always starts out as a perfect square. So now I don't have to really worry about whether or not my resolution is right, whether or not the size of my plane is the right size for the size of the image. There's not stretching, there's not squishing. I know things are going to be okay. Now, I notice that right now it's not perfectly centered. That really isn't going to be too much of a problem. But even if you wanted to, I could grab these. I could just turn off the extras, and I can set these two layers using my Move tool. I can just center them more. That is honestly more a personal preference or just trying to be neat and tidy. You might also notice that my character only has one arm. Well, this is not the case for my final character. What we're really doing is we're going to be modeling, but only modeling half of my character. So I can actually get rid of this entire side if I wanted to, because the computer is going to be building this side for me. Okay? Now, if you have a character that is not symmetrical, keep in mind you will have to model both sides differently. All right? So, in this case, this character is pretty symmetrical. Most of his appendages and his elements that are on here, they're pretty much even. If they weren't, I would have to model as much as I could, and that would be symmetrical, but then change it so that the other side isn't. So, we know that someone like the Elephant Man or Quasimodo, that's a character that's not symmetrical on both sides. So it would be a little bit more difficult, a little bit more time-consuming. So keep in mind, it's not something that you can't do, but it's definitely something that you should consider, especially thinking about how much time you really do have to work on this project. Okay? Now, once I'm happy with where this image is on the page, all I need to do is go to File, Save My Image, and where I'm going to save it is, of course, in the source images of my project. Now, before I jump into Maya and start working, I need to make sure that Maya has that new project. So go over to Project Window, jump and give it a new name. This is going to be Cooley Character 3D Modeling. Okay, and I'll just put this inside of my Documents folder for now. I will always make a backup. That's very important. We need to make backups very often, but for this project that's not a big deal. And so I'll hit accept. Now that I know I have that project and I know where it needs to be, I'm just going to go File, Save As, jump over to my Documents folder. There's my 3D modeling character Cooley. There it is. Source images. Now, if I wanted to save this as a Photoshop file because I wanted to hang on to all of my layers, I can certainly do that. But keep in mind, this is not going to be what you're using inside of the computer. This is only so that you can make changes or adjustments or use it, for something else later. So I'll just call this character design. Keep my layers on. It's a Photoshop file, and hit save. Then I can come over and say save as, and then I'm just going to change it to a JPEG. Now, keep in mind, for productions, usually I use, like for textures, I use a TIFF. And the reason that I use a TIFF is because they're uncompressed. It means that the file hasn't been degraded in any way to save space. But because this isn't really going to be part of my project, this is just going to be there for a reference while I'm working, a JPEG's perfectly fine. Okay. Okay, so we're done with that, and now we're back inside of Maya. So, the first thing that I'll do is I will create a polygon plane, and as you can see, the shape that I have is a perfect square. Now, if you don't want to have all of these additional intersecting lines, just change it over here with the subdivision width and height. And again, remember, I'm just highlighting the words using my middle mouse button inside my work area and pulling down until I have what I want. Okay. So I'll go into 5 so I can see the shaded view. I'll right-click on it and say Assign a Favorite Material, and I'll choose a Lambert. And then inside of that Lambert, I'm going to choose this little checkerboard because the checkerboard says I want to use a file or a texture of some sort. I'm just going to choose File, and then I'm going to open it up. Now, the really nice thing about this is, where did it take me? It took me straight to the Source Images folder of the project that I'm working in. And the reason that it did that is because this was the project that I just created. So Maya says, well, you just created it. I'm assuming this is where you want to work. And of course it assumed right this time. So here's my drawing, and I'll hit open. Okay, so why don't I see my texture? Well, that's because I'm just looking at it right now inside of the 5 view. I need to change it to a 6 view, and there's my image. So we obviously don't want to start this character, build him as if he's laying down on the table. We want to rotate it up. So we'll just do that. Make sure it's 90 degrees, make sure it's perfect. And then I'm going to look at it in the front view. Now, how do I know this is the front view? Well, because I can see right here it says the front view. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this image over so that it's about dead center down the middle. Now, I can see right here that some of this isn't absolutely perfect down the middle. That's not really going to cause me that much of a problem. But I do want to make sure that the center of the character is correct. All right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that image and rotate it so that I can start to see it inside of this view. And I will rotate that -90. And then I'll pull this more or less in the center. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if I was actually going to be modeling this character, I don't think I would want these drawings in my way. But the great thing about the orthographic views is that no matter how far I push them back, here they stay exactly where they're supposed to stay. And that's because inside of the orthographic views, the side view, the front view, and the top view, there is no perspective. So an object moving further away doesn't seem to change. But I do want to point this out. Notice that right now I'm pushing it in the negative. In other words, this is the X direction that I'm moving it right now. Watch what happens if I start pulling it into a positive side. You see how the grid suddenly disappeared? Well, that's because this particular view is over here. And even though we can't see this grid, there's actually a giant grid all the way across this. So if I just push it behind that center line here, I can see my grid. And that means that when I start making my objects, I'll still see the drawings in the background. So I can grab my other one, and I can do the same thing. So watch this. If I start pulling it into the positive side, I have officially brought it out of that grid. But if I push it into the negative, now I can see the grid. So here I have my two pieces of paper. I'm going to grab both of them and just put it into a new layer. Then I can turn on my reference, and I'll even call this ref images. And now I'm not able to accidentally select my planes. So once I have this set up, I definitely don't want to move further until I have saved my scene. So I'll just save this as Cooley character. Hit save. Now, if I come over to File, go to Save As, and open up that little option box, you'll notice that Incremental Saves is indeed turned on. I might also turn on the Limit Incremental Saves to 20. Now, the reason that I would limit it is if I had a thumb drive, and because it's the end, getting close to the end of the quarter, my thumb drive is getting a little full. I don't necessarily want an infinite number of saves if I don't have space for it. Okay, so just be very, very careful with that. All right. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that our box only has to build on one side, and the other side gets built for us for free. So the first thing I'm going to do is just turn off my reference images. Don't need those right now for what I'm about to explain next. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a simple Polygon Cube. Now keep in mind, inside of the Polygon Cube options, I have turned off interactive creation. The reason that I turned it off is because I want a perfect square in the dead center of my scene. If you have it on, you're going to have to hold down Shift, create it, and make sure that you snap it back to the middle. Okay? Now, the next couple of steps, if you don't do them exactly the way that you see me do them, will cause you problems. So please watch very, very carefully. When I right-click and go to my faces, notice that I have those face points turned on. Okay? So from any view, we can see that my faces have these little center points. Now, you might be using it in the other technique. So if I were to come over to Settings and Preferences, go to Preferences, find my selection options, and right here it says, how do you want to select your polygons? And I wanted to select them from the center. But if I select whole face and I hit save, now we have individual faces. Well, that might work great, but watch this. From the front view, how on earth am I supposed to select my one side without accidentally selecting other sides? Okay, so I want to only select this one side. Now, of course, I just did it, but for me, it's much easier to understand and to follow along. I'm going to keep my centers turned on, and that way, even inside of wireframe, I can see where my polygon faces are. So I can just select this one, and I only have that one selected. See how much easier that is? Now, I need to get this face to end up right here, and I need it to be so perfectly down the center that it is mathematically perfect. Now, if I tried to do that manually, it's not going to work very well, but I can snap this face right along this just by making a snap to grid, and I do that by holding down the X key. You see how this changes? This icon here changes. Also, if we look up here, we can see that the magnet picture is highlighting to let me know that that's what I'm doing. So I select it and just drag, and now it has snapped to the perfect center. Okay, so I have taken this cube, and all I did is I took the face that was here and I snapped it over there. Now the next step that I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit delete, because I don't want that center face, and I call it center because this is down the middle of my scene. Now, when I go back to object mode, notice that the move tool is still dead center. So when we look at it like this, my cube is on this side, but there's nothing on this side. This is what we need. If it doesn't look like this, if your move tool is somehow over here, it's not working right, okay? All right, now, if I were to duplicate this face, or excuse me, this polygon, and I scale it to a -1, do you notice how it looks like it's back together? This is basically what we're going to be making, but the difference is we're not going to be using just the duplicate tool, because if I start to change this side, nothing's happening over here. So I'm just going to delete that face, polygon, and I'm going to show you how I can make a duplicate on the other side of this grid that actually follows along, that mirrors everything that this polygon is going to do. And we do that using the duplicate special command. Now, I'm going to go into the option box, and it might be a good idea to just go to edit and hit reset. Now, everything is like it should be at the very beginning, and now anything that we change, we know that we're the one changing it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change it from copy to instance. Now, what an instance does is it knows that it came from a different object and that that object is in control. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scale, because remember what I did? I hit scale and I pulled it backwards. Notice, remember, R, G, B is X, Y, Z, and that's 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3 is X, Y, Z. So I know that I need to scale it in the X in a -1. And that's pretty much it. Now when I hit apply, watch what happens over here. So we now have this object flipped to this side. And this time when I select a vertex point, watch this. Now the other side is going to do whatever I do to this one. So now would probably be a good time to take this one, remember it's the one that I created the negative across, add it to a layer, and just put it in a reference and call this instance. And I might even change it to a color so that I know the difference. Okay? Now, I can bring back my images as my reference, and now it's time to start building my character. Now, there's something very important to catch. Watch this. This object right here has a move tool that I can pull around. But watch what happens when I try to move it. You see how this object doesn't quite know it's supposed to be following this one? However, if I grab hold of all of the vertex points, I can move both of them without any problem. Keep in mind that what we're really trying to do is we're trying to work as efficiently as possible. Okay? Now, we work on both sides of our character, the front side and the side view. And the reason that we do that is because this is a three-dimensional character. We don't want to forget that this character is, in fact, three-dimensional. Okay? So, very, very quickly, I have part of this character's shape going. If I go into wireframe, I can no longer see my drawing. So what I might do instead is select both of these faces and assign maybe a new Lambert to it and just make it semi-transparent. And I can even make it a color so I can really see what's going on. Now, keep in mind, in order to assign that shader to this side, I had to first take it off of my layer. Okay? So now I can use all of the tools at my disposal, things like the Insert Loop tool. Watch this. The Edge Loop tool, I create it, and it works on both sides because this other side knows that what I'm doing has to be done on the other object. So I just create a couple of faces. Now I can start to shape my character. And I know that my character doesn't have a giant flat face, so I'm going to make sure that I take the corner edge and just pull it down a little bit. Now we're starting to round out that face. See that? So if I hit 3 right now, we can see the smooth preview is showing me what this character looks like so far. I can look at him from all these different views. And like I've said before, modeling is pushing and pulling points until you get what you want. So I need to make another face down the middle so that I can extrude his nose. Okay, so I'm just going to take this and hit extrude and pull it outward. Now there's something very important to note here. Do you see how this doesn't really look like it's working? And yet if I have it low res, it works just fine. Well, keep in mind that when I extrude a face, what I'm actually extruding is all these edges. So just because I had deleted this face down the middle, when I extruded, it gave me a new face. So all I have to do is select those 2 faces there. Well, technically it's 1, but I'm selecting 2 at the same time because it's all mirrored. And I'm just going to hit delete. So that way, I'm never going to have faces down the center if I want the object to be seamless. Now, when we get down to his legs, obviously there's going to be faces over here, and nothing in the middle. So that's something to keep in mind as we're starting to build this character. Okay. Now, when we look at it inside of the smooth view, and then we look at it inside of the low res view, we can see that these faces right here definitely make quite a jump. But the only reason that it's doing that is because there aren't any edges around this area. So the next thing we need to do is just add a couple here. So even inside of the smooth view, you can see there we go. Okay, so while I'm adjusting and tweaking some of the points that I've made so far, something that I should really point out, this is very, very important. If I grab one of these faces, if I start moving it like this, notice how I'm transferring beyond that middle point. We never want that to happen, okay? We don't want to accidentally cross the streams here. And if we ever get something that looks like a sharp point and we don't want that, all we have to do is round out the other polygons. See how easy that is? So the same thing goes with anything else. Like this one little point right here, I'm planning on having more geometry here, but even if I didn't, all I'd have to do is just round it out that way. Maybe pull it out this way. And see, that's just fixing it really easy. But yeah, you definitely don't want to ever pull the center line away or past that 0 point. It just makes a big, big problem, especially down the road. Okay? So I'll grab the faces that meet and make up his neck. And I'll take both of those and hit extrude. Now something else I should point out is as I start to pull it in this direction, see how these suddenly jutted in one direction and not this straight line that I was looking for? Well, that's because of the angle of these faces. You see how they're angled away? And as I start to pull, they think they're supposed to be moving away. A simple solution is to look at it in the view you want it to go, change it to the Move tool, and just pull it down where you want it. So this way we don't have that issue. So if I hit 3 again, we can see that we're getting that center line problem again. So we can just grab these, delete them. And then we're also getting that same issue that we had of that stretching, just like inside of the nose. So once again, all it is going to take is to insert some edge loops, maybe one there and one there for now. And if I need more later, I can always add more later. It's not a big deal. So if I hit 3 now, you can see that it's starting to look a little bit better. So I can pull that down. And if I need more edge loops, I can always make more. But we definitely don't want to make it so much that it becomes very difficult to work with. Honestly, you know, people might ask me, how many polygons is too many polygons? And the simple answer is, when you're no longer able to work with it as efficiently as you want, chances are it's because there's just too many. Okay, so that's a pretty good start. Now, definitely want to delete my history. As you can see, I'm writing a book over here. So I will just save this to be absolutely safe and then go to Edit, Delete History. And now the next time, as I want to start building a new piece, remember, we don't have to make all of our character out of the exact same piece. I can come over and I can create a new Polygon Cube, and I can do that entire process over again. So I'll grab that side, hold down X, snap, and delete. So remember, I've deleted that face out. I'm just moving a little faster than I did last time. And then I need to do the duplicate special. Because my settings are correct from the last time, I just have to hit duplicate special, and I know that's going to be right. Grab both of these. I'll open up my Hypershade. And I'll assign that semi-transparent. If I wanted to put a different shader on it, I totally could. But I think this has worked just fine. So here's inside of my instance side. See that? And now it's time to start building the body. So I'll start with what I already had, the 6 points that made up the character so far. And now I can add some edge loops. And notice that I'm building knowing that I'm going to have to extrude this outward to make the arm. So I'll just extrude and move out, and you can see that as I do that, they starts doing the same thing on the other side. So I can hit G to do it again, G to do it again. And at this point, you know, less is more. Less is much better when you're first starting out. Don't add too many pieces of information too soon, because it's just going to give you problems. So if I hit 3, I can see that I need to, you know, round off the back just a little bit, bring that in, pull these in a little bit, pull that down just slightly. Okay, so now would be a good time to make a new line going all the way across so that I can round off this shape. See that? See how easy that was? And now I can look at it from the other direction, and we can see that he isn't exactly where he needs to be, but that's easy enough because I don't have so much information that it's going to cause me too many problems. Just grab that area, pull that back a little bit, grab the chest, bring that forward. Now, when you're doing a character model, be careful not to pose the character in a very unnatural way. I drew the character, and he does have sort of an S-curve in his back, but if you're going to try to make your character actually posed like they're moving already, it's going to become very difficult to shape later. And when I say later, I don't necessarily mean in this class, but eventually you'll want this character or another character that you make later on to be able to move and talk, and you know, it's going to become very cumbersome trying to get the character to pose properly. So the easiest thing to do at this point in the game would be to simply keep the character in a very neutral, and this, remember, is called a T pose. And the T pose is nice because it's very neutral and the character can move in multiple directions in multiple ways. And you'll remember not too long ago I mentioned that both of these sides were not drawn perfectly symmetrically. But I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about the overall shape of this character. So I'll bring that color up a little bit, bring this one down a little bit, and there we go. So once again, lots of history. Before I do anything, I'll just save, go to Edit, Delete History, and now we have the start, definitely not finished, but definitely the start of my character. So I'll continue on. I'll make a new cube, bring it right to where the legs are, grab that face, and once again do the exact same thing. Hold down X, drag it to the center, delete it, go back to object mode, right? And then Control Shift duplicate. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, sorry. I have another plugin that's using those buttons. I forgot. Duplicate special. There we go. And then grab hold of both of these, assign that semi-transparent, and then grab the instance, add it to the list, and now I can start building this character's legs. Now, before I start dragging it down like I did before, I'm actually going to make it look like it's a pair of underpants. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a line in between, grab this face only, and extrude it straight down. And notice that because I did that, I now have this space for where the character's legs can go. And of course, the stretching is because there aren't enough in between edges. And now I can start building my character much, much easier. Okay. And so to move the entire set of legs, I'm doing it based on the moving vertices. Just makes my life a lot easier. Now these two pieces can start to conform their shapes together so that it looks like this is coming off of the body. And then the legs are also coming off the body. So we'll just add a couple more vertex points. Now we can thin out the kneecap or the knee area and then just extrude out for that little kneecap. See how easy that is? Now, is this character officially done? No, of course not. There's still lots that I could be doing to this character. But in a very short amount of time, I've gotten quite a bit of the character all set, didn't I? So I'll hit save, grab everything, delete history, and now I can start to move on to more detailed parts. I can do one shoe, of course, just one shoe, and then instead of instancing it over, we'll just duplicate it and flip it across the negative. Kind of the same way that we were doing that when we were building the mode of transportation. Think way back. All right, so probably grab this face right here to use as the source of the ear, maybe both of those. He does have kind of big ears. Okay, so we'll just extrude outward, and then we'll extrude back some. Then we'll just add a couple of divisions here. Round that out a little bit. And then for a really simple lobe area, just pull this back a little, extrude it inward slightly, shrink it down a little bit. I'll just slide that over some, and then we'll take this one little face and extrude it out. Now, because this is semi-transparent, it's starting to get a little hard to see, but that's easy. I can just go over to my shading and say use default material, and he just pops right back. The texture is still on here, and you can even see the texture is visible in here, but in this view only, inside of shading, I just asked to see the original shape. This allows me to make adjustments without having to change the shader itself. Okay, so that's probably as much detail as I can get into the ear right now, but that's mainly because I don't have all of the other edge loops that I'm planning on putting onto this character. But again, not bad for, I don't know what, 20 minutes? Half hour? All right, so in a relatively short amount of time, I've really managed to block out the character pretty well. This would be a good time to really take stock and sort of look at it and make sure that it is the shape that that you sort of had in your mind. Like we were talking about before, you know, is the nose so high or so long that it's just becoming a distraction? You know, little questions like that. And honestly, I can't answer those questions for you on a video because I don't see your particular project, but just be aware that those are going to be things that you'll want to address later. For an eyeball, all I'm going to do is take the face that I've created that is in the location. We're just going to extrude it in. And if I come over to my my low-res version here, I can sort of watch myself build it in. And if you're planning on making eyelids or anything like that, just keep in mind these faces right here and down here, they make really great eyelids. So looking at it like that, that's what we've got so far. Need a little bit more detail shapes, so I'm just going to increase top and bottom, and now I can round out the top part of the eye. Maybe bring in this sharp edge here. Just bring it in a little bit. And keep in mind that this is a three-dimensional shape. In order to see the eye from the side, it has to be able to go around. Now, if you're planning on building eyeballs, I would probably suggest starting with a sphere, rotating it down so that these isoparms are facing just like that, and then just grab, and underneath your surfaces options, underneath edit NURBS, there's insert isoparm. So I can do this a couple of times, hit G because it was the last thing I did, and then maybe one more. There we go. So now I can assign maybe a blend because, you know, eyeballs are moist and shiny. So we'll go add a ramp, just a ramp texture to this. Now at first, of course I have to turn on use, or turn off use default, and there it is. Now at first this never looks right, but that's okay. All I have to do is make it a U ramp instead and see how the color goes from red back here to green over here to blue in the middle. So instead of linear, I'm just going to change it to none, and now I can do that. That'll be the black. I can do this. This will be the color, so let's just give him, I don't know, green eyes. Why not? And then this area back here can be white. Now this green might be okay for a really cartoony character, but I don't think I really like that particular shade of green. So let's just bring that down a little bit into something a little less difficult to handle. There we go. Simple enough. So now I can bring this into my character's face, shrink it down a little bit, put it where I want it to go. And keep in mind that the size of your character's eyeball, by the way, I should save. I haven't saved in a little while. Just made a new object. Don't want to lose it. So we'll just put this more or less in the right spot. I can go over to my use default shader, and I can see a little smaller, bring that forward a little bit. And now I can shape it. I can shape my character's face to more accurately match the circular eyeball. Because without the eyeball, I wouldn't know, am I too far off? Am I too far in one direction or another? But this way, I'm able to see and just build around it. Okay, so I'll bring this a little bit further out. So even from the side, we can see the eyeball, and from the front, we can see the eyeball. And so I can continue shaping this until I'm really happy. And of course, these little tiny adjustments can take a good long while if you're not careful of your time management. So just be aware of that. These are things that we don't want to accidentally find that we're losing a lot of time, and we don't want to do that. So the next thing that I would do is I would group this, because remember, when you group something, it always takes place in it always goes back to the origin. So now I can just regular duplicate this and then just make it a negative across, and there's my other eyeball. Now this one and this one should probably be in the same group, but they're not right now, so I'll just select the two objects and hit group, and now they're part of the same group, only it's way down there, so I'll just bring it up higher. And now I can adjust the eyeballs if I need to, but right now I think we're doing just fine the way they are. If I need to make any adjustments or anything, I will later. And so now we have the character's eyeballs. We need to move on to maybe the nostril. So I'll just grab this face right here, move back into the use default material, go over to my polygons and say extrude, pull it out a little bit, and there we are, we're building a nostril. So I oftentimes go back to my low-res version because it gives me a much better insight into what this character really is going to look like. It also helps to know whether or not the topology, and the topology again of course means the way the surface of the object, how many polygons it has, how laid out or smooth or even the polygons themselves are, things like that. So I will, grab this one, pull it in some, but not too much. I don't want to pull it so far that it crosses over. I don't want to do that. And we'll just extrude in, maybe pull it up just slightly. So when we go into a higher res version, that's what we get. And that's probably good for now. I'll have to add in some more geometry, some more detail, but for right now I think that's fine. So I can do the same thing over to the mouth. Just for starting points, I can do another edge loop and I can start cutting it up to make the mouth. So once I have the faces that I want, depending on what the character is actually going to do and how wide the mouth has to open, little things like that, I can always make adjustments. But the easiest way to do it is to just extrude, pull it all the way in, get rid of that center line, and now he's got a mouth. And so then it's just going to be a matter of adding some edges all the way around to build the lips and things like that. And as we get further and further, you'll start to learn some more rules as far as building characters, especially building characters, intending them for animation. We're going to talk about concentric circles, keeping everything so that even the mouth kind of looks like this in this ring pattern. And you can certainly start doing that. On this particular assignment, I don't think it really matters because we're not going to be making the character speak in any way. We're not going to, worry about that. So I'd say keep it simple, and as we get further and further, those little steps and those little rules and things like that will just become second nature. You'll understand them, and you'll have opportunities to exercise all those fun little rules to watch out for. Okay, so once again, is it perfect? Am I done yet? No, but it's a good start. Okay, so keep working. We'll have plenty of time to discuss more and more techniques as we go. If you have any questions, of course, you're free to send me an email if you're watching this outside of class, or I'm always available right there in class during work time. Okay, so good luck and enjoy.